Welcome back, coaches. This is the Football Coaching Podcast. I am Daniel Chamberlain, co-host, here with Joe Daniel, as always.
What's up, Coach?
Well, it's my first week of not coaching football because we got our tails whipped in the playoffs. So that's what's up. Rather pouty. In fact, it was opening morning of deer season for rifle here in Oklahoma that Saturday morning. And instead of coming home and going to bed and getting up and going hunting, I grabbed a cold beer, I sat in my computer chair, and I watched film and pouted about it. But I broke the whole film down, statted everybody. Like, I didn't want to look at it again. You know what I mean?
Right.
We did not play great, but it was competitive until, the very last whistle, basically. They had a highly talented wide receiver, and throughout the game, I would tell you that we kind of kept him under wraps, but when you get to the end of the game and he had a $185 and 4 touchdowns, you're like, okay, maybe. But it was still so competitive. He never took over.
Right.
Until when there was less than 60 seconds on the clock, and he kind of punched last. So
yeah, I remember we had a game against a Division I, FBS receiver, and the quarterback was very good too. And we were not really good, and we had a undersized but very tough corner. He was probably 5'6". I mean, this kid's 6'3" or whatever. But he was a tough kid, and we basically told him, like, I don't care how many pass interference flags you get, like, that doesn't matter. Just don't let this kid. And it was the same deal. We were like, we felt like we had him under control all night, and I think realistically he didn't beat us. We didn't win the game, but like it wasn't because of him. And we probably wouldn't have been in the game had we had to double that kid.
Right.
But we just put one kid on him. And at the end of the game, it was the same thing. It was like 8 catches for 165. And it was like, and like 1 touchdown or something like that. And it was like, I mean,
yep.
Had everybody else done their job, then you walk away like feeling pretty good. Right.
Yeah. I think he caught 2 for like right at 75 yards. It was just little smoke screens.
Yeah.
The first and the last touchdown of the game. He had a little, goal line fade, almost like an out route. I mean, it was a good route. And I can't remember what his other one was, but heck of a player, man. I mean, the whole team was good. It was a fun game. It was one of those that, like, at the end, you're like, it sucks we lost, but that was a lot of fun to coach. Making adjustments, situational stuff. Once again, this year more than ever, I've seen every game truly as just a whole bunch of situations, pinned to each other. Like, there's not a lot of non-situational football. So,
sure.
But came up short. So, Thanksgiving week, we're going to enjoy some Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you guys out there. It's 2 weeks late, but
only a week late.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forget. We used to be 2 weeks ahead. Now we're just 1. So 1 week late. And good luck if y'all are going for the state championship tomorrow.
We still have a couple weeks for state championships.
Do you? I think our guys play
after this.
Fridays our semis, and then next week's our final. Unless they may wait a week, but I think it's back to back to back.
Ours, so the region final is Thanksgiving week. And then the region, so we have 4 region champions. So you go to the state semi the following week, to the first week of December. And then the state championships are that December
Gotcha. That makes sense.
For December the 6th is the state semis, and December 13th, I guess. I think they play them on Saturday, so it might be December 14th. But state championships are that following week, so still a little bit of time to go for them. But we played like trash, so that's all. We have 9 starters on both sides of the ball, and coming back, and you could argue that's a higher number because one of those guys was that actually, probably because of injuries and whatnot, we probably have, probably 10 or more that have, on both sides of the ball that had significant playing time coming back. So we'll, we end up with basically 3 or 4 healthy seniors at the end of the year. We'll get one of the guys that we lost for the season back. And so we got something to build on, but we got to do some building for sure.
That's got to be a good feeling. Like, we lost our starting running back, some wide receivers, a couple linebackers. Our top 2 leading tacklers on defense. So I mean, there's some dudes we got to replace, but it's not unfathomable that we come back next year and look good.
Yeah, I'm excited about, as we talking to my head coach. Our film didn't. It's Tuesday now, and I think I got a notification today on my phone that the film was uploaded. Like, just nobody wanted to see it. Right? It was just not. It was just, nobody wanted to see it. Nobody was upset about it. It was just like, when you get time, like, just nobody wants to look at that right now, because I mean, it was not good. But yeah, I mean, I was talking to my head coach after the game, and it's like, the guys this year was a lot of, because we graduated a very senior heavy class last year. And in fact, this class, this next year will not be will not be as senior heavy, especially with our top, kind of weapons are younger. They're actually freshmen and sophomores right now. So that'll be coming back. So there's more than 1 year potentially. But, this year, because we graduated so many, we were probably in week 6 or 7 before we started to figure out who we were. We had an almost entirely new offensive line, new quarterback, new running, he played some last year, but, running back, new everything. And then on defense, it was like a wholesale change. And so we were moving pieces around, trying guys at safety, trying guys at corner. We're moving guys from inside linebacker, outside linebacker, we're moving from defensive line to linebacker. And we will be able to come in this next season knowing, okay, this is what the quarterback likes to throw, and this is what we block well, and this is the combination of offensive linemen and the skill sets that they have. And the offensive line will actually be one of our more, well, I mean, everybody will have experience, but having really 5 offensive linemen coming back who started a game or two, one started 2 games at the end because we had an injury, but so we'll have 5 offensive linemen with legitimate playing time. And the one who started 2 games at the end of the year played Y for a lot of the year. So played our tight end position and our run package stuff. So looking forward to that. I mean, just this year was, the fact that we made some school history this year is awesome, because it didn't feel like that was something that was on the.
I mean, outside looking in too, right? It looks like, man, this is a tough one for Joe. Like,
yeah, and I think I told you some of that.
All of a sudden, you're hosting a playoff game. Like,
yeah, I told you that early in the year. Like, this was a very tough year, especially the first half. Like I said, once we hit our stride, week 6, week 7, like, it didn't finish the way that we wanted to. We played the number 1 seed, and by far and above the class of the conference. So I said region championship. It's actually, I guess, a conference championship. We don't do regions anymore, but we played by far and above the class of the conference, and they're going up to 4A next year. So we didn't play a very competitive game. That was a disappointment. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those seasons where it was like, this is bad. And then all of a sudden we kind of pulled things together, and said we had a very, very high strength of schedule, which actually counts for something in Virginia, actually counts for a lot in Virginia. And it was kind of a down, like, it was a little bit of a down, and there was one dominant team in the conference. Everybody else was not. And so, our schedule was very tough, but we don't play our conference in the schedule, on the schedule.
Right.
Very weird. So yeah, we ended up hosting a home playoff game for the first time in school history. We ended up winning a playoff game for the first time in school history. We had some very exciting games. We blocked a lot of field goals. We know we can do that. 2 of them to win games. So yeah, all in all, you look back on it, and it's never, I talk about this in a lot of different places. There is no way that as a football coach, you look back on the season and go, man, this was the season that and I talk about the book, The Gap in the Gain, by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy. And like, that's such a good book for football coaches to read, because that's what we're always doing. We're always measuring against the ideal, and the ideal is winning a state title. And if you don't win the state title, it's never, you didn't reach the ideal. Well, there's only, in the state of Virginia, there's only 6, and that had an ideal season. And some of them probably look at it and go, we should have won that game by more. So you have to step back and go, man, I don't, at the beginning of the season, did I expect a better season than this? I did. I absolutely expected to win a playoff game. I absolutely expected us to take the next step. But if I look at week 3, when who we were, we look at week 1, week 2, week 3, and I look at who we were at the start of the season was revealed, and it was not what we thought it was going to be. This was probably one of our best coaching jobs. Like,
yeah,
and you look at it that way, and you go, man, we somehow pulled this thing together and won some games that, we won 3 out of the last three out of who would be Caroline, Petersburg, and then New Kent in the playoffs. So it was 3 or 4 or something like that down the stretch that like saved the season, really, and pulled it together. So I think that's one of the things that we're happy about is we've always played well at the end. It's not like we have all this talent and then squander it.
Right.
I'm
very intrigued by y'all's playoff system. I know we've talked about it several times. I don't want to waste a lot of time doing it, but it's just, it kind of puts the fun back in the regular season because every game counts.
Oh yeah. And
So I would have to go
not
back
only
and
does
look
every
like-
game count, every game that the team that you beat in week 1, every game they play counts. So you're watching all the teams that you play all season long because it's not just a win. If they go and win 8 games, you're getting 8, 12 or whatever it is points for that. If they go and go 0 for the rest of the year, like it's really an interesting deal.
I'm gonna have to like just sit down and maybe do this season and y'all's points and see how things would have shook out because we played like 2 really, really tough teams. I think they're both still in it in the semis, even from a class above us to start the season.
Yeah, it's good points.
So,
good
anywho,
let's talk a little topic that only people in Virginia would know about. We had a school here,
okay,
but I think I want to talk about it from your standpoint because I know that Oklahoma handles this very differently.
Yes,
we had a school. Essentially, I don't know the full story. I just know that I think that this is awful, and the fact that there's people who think that this is not awful, I just, I don't understand. Essentially, we had a guy, and this is in Northern Virginia, and it's I think 6A, 6A playoffs. We had a coach, quote unquote, come into a school a few years ago, did some heavy recruiting, which is technically illegal, but admittedly, it was almost comical the way that he was doing it because it happens. We've got basketball teams. We've had football teams. It's been going on for years and years and years. We have lots of illegal recruiting. I hate it. I am very, very glad that I have been at schools, at least my last 2 schools, that have not been affected by it. I'm very fortunate in that. And I hope that continues. And if it doesn't continue, I'll leave. I mean, I'll just be done. Like I'm not dealing with this atmosphere. But it was almost comical. And it also like it didn't affect us. It's one of those like this is awful, but it's out there. I've always thought it's bad, but like I'm not going on a crusade because I have my own things going on.
right.
And also our governing body has no power. I mean, really. They probably have some, but like literally you have to self-report.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's no police, right?
Right. So he this year gets paid, I'm sure, well, to move to a different school where I've heard numbers everywhere from 5 to 25, a significant number. By the way, he won a couple state titles at the school that he was at,
right?
With all the players that he recruited there. A significant number of them move with him. Different county, different school district. Suddenly they all found homes. Because the housing market, houses are very cheap right now. It's very easy to get, inexpensive rent or whatever. So how many ever? I was told that even the starting quarterback who was pretty good at the school that he came to just decided not to even play because it was like, and again, I don't know. This is what I was told that he was like I'm not gonna get to play. I just didn't play. So brought a significant number. They, had given up something like 6 points this year. They were blowing every single team out. Everybody in the state knows it. It is so bad. Like this is just yes, this has happened. Yes, it's been recruiting, but not this like just blatant. And at one point they said, okay, they're not going to get to play in the playoffs. We're suspending because it was so bad. They said they're not going to be allowed to play in the playoffs. And then there was a lawsuit filed or something like that. And then they let them back into the playoffs. And then there were some text messages that got leaked and some evidence, that got leaked. And then the school district or the principal or whoever said, yeah, we're withdrawing from the playoffs. So that is like, I'm surprised that there are people that even support this. Like they've got to be the parents of the kids. Like,
right.
There's places for this, right? There's private schools. There's, it's a public school and a public school district. But I know that you guys have a transfer portal and like it's very different, I guess.
So,
or if you just like, I guess my question is, do you just lean into it and go, screw it, this is the way life is now?
it's very strange here because we still can't legally recruit. So recruiting is still off the board. Essentially, the transfer
I'm
portal,
sure that works really well.
it almost hurt people. So historically, if a kid wanted to change schools, if they had after their freshman year, they are considered at a school, and then they can't. You have to sit a year if you go anywhere else. So the transfer portal gave them a chance that without their parents changing districts, you get one move per year. Now,
Within district?
no, with anywhere in the state.
Oh, okay.
So our state about 5 years ago, something went to open enrollment. So it
Okay,
doesn't
so
matter
you
what
can enroll
district you're
anywhere.
in, you can enroll anywhere.
Okay.
But not athletically. If you play a single varsity sport at a school your freshman year, that's the school you go to now.
Okay, so you just got to make your decision in the 8th grade. But if I can live in the Panhandle, and I can decide that as long as I can get there and find a nice little apartment, that I can go to Bixby if I want to.
Right. As far as I know, yes.
I got to make that
Somebody's gonna
decision
say
before
no,
my
that's
9th
not
grade year.
correct. That's right. If you go your 9th grade year, that's what determines what school you're at. What the transfer portal did was allow people one move without their parents having to move. So if you think about Tulsa Metro, Owasso's the north side, Bixby's the south side, Broken Arrow's the east side, Union and Jinx are kind of there in the south center part of that metro, right? And so now all of a sudden those kids it's a 30-minute drive. There's a lot of people that make that drive anyway, so they can go to any school they want. They can make one change. They had a kind of a weird trying to get the rules in place this year. Like they were just telling a bunch of kids, like, no, you're no longer eligible. They would, because they couldn't figure out, like, did they pass all this criteria, all this stuff, right? Trying to make sure that they weren't breaking any rules. They were kind of overly strict with it. But that's pretty much what we have. Now, a part of that, however, and I hate this part, if a coach, and I don't know I was told it was 1 year prior, but it could be 2. But essentially, if you've ever played under a coach and he changes schools, that become a school on your no transfer list. If
you can't go
there,
with him.
Correct. That's what it's trying to stop. Is
trying to stop what happened here.
I'm at school A as a coach. I go to school B and 10 kids go with me. That can't happen. The problem is like it's still Oklahoma, and coaching is still a very volatile profession. So like there's only so many. Like look at me. I live in a town where there's.
Is it any coach or just the head coach?
I don't know. That's where I think originally it was just head coach. But I never got clarification, and it's like the rules are still so up in the air.
Like if the offensive coordinator gets a head job somewhere else, he can't bring his quarterback with him.
Right. Yeah, I don't. And unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that.
Unless his quarterback is his son. I don't know. Like
now, that's the thing is, as long as your parents move, they still can't do anything about it. So if your parents want to move from Jay to whatever Bixby, by all means, you can go over there and play football. There's nothing they can.
So I think our issue is that you can, if your parents move, everything's fine. The problem is that there's a lot of falsifying addresses and things like that, and everybody's got an aunt that lives somewhere.
We had a ton of it's moving with your aunt, your uncle, all that's out now. It has to be your blood relative or whoever your primary guardian is has to move as well. So that is one part that they got rid of. They're just much more strict on it now. So
I don't think that we don't have the system in place to be strict on it right now. The rules, I think, are somewhat in place, but there is nobody to enforce. Like I said, it has to be self-policed essentially.
Right.
And as long as that is the case, nothing's going to change. And all that's going to change is just going to get worse. People are going to find more loopholes. And here's the great thing about this, as far as I know, remember that this school was told that they were not going to be allowed to play a playoff. They actually put a pause on the 6A playoffs and then came back and played them when the lawsuit happened. So teams, like, they were getting ready to play, and then they were like, wait, we got a lawsuit. We got to figure this out. And so they actually had to wait to play their game. So this team has screwed up everything. And by the way, the team that they beat when they played that playoff game, maybe 2, I'm not sure, they're out.
They're still just out. That's crazy.
And the team, and look how far along we are.
Right.
Somebody got a bye in essentially a championship game, right? A regional conference championship game. So it's just all screwed up. And it's the fact that they allowed it for so long, and it screwed everything up. And and everybody turned a blind eye or whatever. I mean, like I said, it was comical how bad it was.
We can report as members of the OSSAA, we can report another program for their wrongdoing. So it doesn't have to be self-reporting. But I don't, man, you'd get a big black eye, right? And you've got to coach with these guys for the next 5, 10, 20 years or whatever. And it's like, it comes back to like, don't snitch. Snitches get stitches. Like
it's funny because the school that I first coached at here in Richmond, I coached at Smithfield for 1 year in the it's not the peninsula, but southeast, and I lived in the peninsula. And then I came to Prince George. And the funny thing is that one of the coaches is on our staff, and he was there. This was 1996, I think. I mean, like, I was in high school in Georgia. Right. I had nothing to do with this. So Thomas Dale. So Prince George has traditionally not been a great football program, and it used to be very, very hard to make the playoffs. Like I said, as much as I can say, like, this first playoff game in school history, first playoff win, whatever. Like, it used to be very hard to make the playoffs. You used to be like, you had to be 9-1, 10-0. It's easier now, but we're still the first, and that's been over a decade since it changed, I think. So Prince George, by the way, still never won a playoff game. I can at least say that we won a playoff game before them. But in 1996, they made their only playoff appearance back then, back before the rules changed, back before they made a more reasonable postseason. They did it because Thomas Dale ended up having to forfeit 2 games because they had a exchange student from Finland or something who they just kind of let on the team because he was there, and he's like the team mascot or whatever, basically, I've been told. And in like a blowout game or 2 blowout games, they let him go out because he kicked. Of course. So in like 2 blowout games, they let him go out, kick an extra point. Right? Just, let him go out there. Well, he was ineligible. And by the rules of so that was somehow reported by Prince George. And they were forced to, and again, I don't know what the rules were at that time, and if they've changed because of that, who knows?
Right.
But the head coach at the time was Vic Williams, who's one of those legendary coaches here. In my first 6 or 7 years, Vic has since passed away, but my first 6 or 7 years, Vic was still the head coach at Thomas Dale. And I had nothing to do with it. And in fact, the head coach, our head coach had been, I think, on staff, or at least been on staff with the head coach at the time. But the guy that I coach with now was on staff then, and we joke about it because it was we used to suspect, and now I know it is very, very real, that Vic, until the day that he died, lived to run the score up on Prince George, and
for reporting that,
and could do it, and I mean would run it up. I remember my parents came. And they came to a game, probably one of the last years that Vic was alive. They came to a game, or Vic was coaching, and they came to a game. And I think my mom, she wasn't doing great at the time, but I remember they being just like, I don't know, 68-6 or something like that. My parents came 8 hours, however far it was, 6 hours to be at the game, and I don't know why I told them to come to that game. And I mean, and it was just like, it was things that you would watch him play. You would get the film and you would watch, because they blow out a lot of teams, and you would watch him play against those other teams, and hey, they're up. This was before running clocks, by the way. You'd watch the game on film, and they'd be up, 4 touchdowns, and midway through the third quarter, everything is under control, and he'd start to pull guys, and everything's by the book, gentleman's game, right? And then we'd be sitting out there, and we knew it. Like, we knew why. We knew it wasn't our fault, and we knew what had happened. And it was almost like, and it was kind of forgiven because, like, here's this guy that, like, he was super nice. I remember he would invite the head coach over to his house afterwards, right? He always had a party afterwards. They watched Final Score and everything, and he'd have the head coach over. They'd talk, but for that 48 minutes, it was, yeah. He was that was for the rest of his life. He was going to make sure that Prince George paid for that. And by the way, they went to the playoffs and they got destroyed. And that was it. I think they played Verona and got destroyed. And I wasn't there. I was in high school in Georgia. But I paid for it too. So yeah. And like I said,
funny. Like, that's what you have to be weary of, though, right?
It is, but like, the one thing is, I don't think it would, he probably never would have hired the coach that reported that. But, you also know, like, that was reported by the principal. Maybe it was reported by the head coach at the time, but the head coach at the time was Kerry Parker. Kerry Parker was also like, these were two old men towards the end of their careers who were just like, going at it with, but they respect each other, I'm pretty sure. But it's not like he was ever going to hire Kerry Parker and for anything. And so, and that, like, the JV assistant didn't report it. It's like the principal, the athletic director, that kind of stuff. But yeah, you do have to be concerned about that.
Yeah, it's just such a small circle, and I found that some of these circles can be rather toxic if you're not careful. So
Sure.
it's just without a third-party policing system, I don't know. We'll see.
It seems very simple, though. I mean, like, we're wasting a lot of time on this, but we probably should change the title of the episode. It seems very simple to police in that by a third party when it's something so. I'm not talking about the little recruiting violation things type stuff. I'm not looking to go like we're never going to have it's not going to be the NCAA, right? Investigating every little thing and coming back and saying it looks like a booster gave somebody $25. Not that that's illegal anymore, but and that's a recruiting violation. You remember the violations that people would get. I remember Mark Richt, who I think was probably, as far as Division I football coaches, one of the more clean coaches. And I remember Mark Richt getting in trouble, and it was something just absolutely ridiculous. And it was like, what are we doing? But the NCAA, it's never going to be the NCAA. But when it's something so bad, we have two schools, two different teams, two different sports, that it is so bad that it is, just somebody just has to be like, okay, all right, come on.
So I'm 100% okay with changing the title because that'll be fine, because there's plenty we could talk about. And so, like, in Oklahoma, we have a way that we kind of do away with that. Is we'd already talked about the transfer portal, but we have success multipliers. And so if you and now this may have been phased out in this last rule change. This is kind of where this private school, we had the lawsuit this fall or this summer, I guess, before the season started. But essentially, if you go, I think it was 2 out of 3 state championships, and I don't know if you had to win them. It might have even just been in the game 2 out of 3 years, you automatically move up a class.
Right.
So if you went out and did this loaded team recruiting thing, like, you get 2 in a row, that's fine. Well, now you're putting your team at more of a disadvantage because you have to go play bigger schools.
Well, the school that I'm talking about here, they're already at the highest level.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't affect them.
No, absolutely not.
Now, you have a lot of other things in place that would affect them, but yeah, it would impact, say, somebody at my level. It would certainly impact them because there's a big, going from 2A to 3A, going from 3A to 4A is a massive difference.
Yeah.
2A doesn't happen much because, well, I'll tell you what is happening right now at 2A. So I take that back. It's going to be, I say that it's going to be happening in 2A very soon, and that's going to be a deal. But the difference between 2A and 3A, the difference between 3A and 4A is pretty massive. And this is the second time that I've been knocked out by a school that was about to go up, that was already over the numbers requirement. And
so they get like a year to wait?
I think it's 2. They get essentially a grandfather period or whatever they call it. Yeah. So it does not happen automatically. It's not like you're up and because if you think about it, and I don't know about how this works for everybody else, but if you think about it, and you could do it for the playoffs because we play all different levels. But if you talk about, rescheduling games and things like that, I think that's the thought process behind it. But everybody plays 2As, and we're 3A, we play 2As, we play 4As, we play 5As. We scrimmage some 1As, but we don't play them during the season. And we used to play 6As, but last year was the first year we didn't play a 6A. We're actually adding one of those teams back because they're dropping down to 5A, but we kind of just now have a policy of not playing 6As. But yeah.
So I'd say the kind of similar issue we have in Oklahoma, and I don't know how I feel about it entirely, because once again, if you whine about it, like, all you have to do is line up and beat these teams. But we have private schools that are within our public school districts and playoffs.
And they're allowed to recruit, right?
They can recruit. They can go in and limit their ADM, like their numbers, right? How many people are at their school. So every 2 years they look at our ADM
So
and
they
then
so like you can't control how many
reclass.
people move into your district,
Yeah,
but
public school has to take
right,
everyone, but they can say, "Nah, we're done taking
we're
kids.
capped
We
right
hit
here. We're
our
capped
point
at the
right.
top of
We're capped."
this conference
Exactly.
or whatever.
And then, previously the way we that was the success multipliers. It was like, that's fine, but now every kid is actually 1.5 kids or whatever, however their numbers went. So you still had to claim their total ADM, but now they looked like they were a bigger school. And that's how they handled it for a long time. But this lawsuit last summer, or this summer, I guess, in 24, basically said they can only go up one level forever now. So if they're a
Okay.
2A school, the highest we can ever make them go is 3A, which is where all of them are. They all carry 2A ADMs and play in the 3A, and it's very, very tough to beat them. We did this season, right? We had one of them in our district. We just lined up and beat them. Now, I think they were down a little bit from years past. Obviously, I work with some outstanding coaches that
Sure. Yeah.
scheme wise put us in the right, gave us a chance, and we went out and beat these guys. But the state championship this year will be a private school
Yeah.
for my class, and that's, if I'm not mistaken, 3 out of 4 schools. No, two this year, 2 out of 4, because they ended up on the same side of the bracket. But 2 out of 4 are the semi-final
Semifinals, yeah.
teams. So
Our
it's a hard pill to swallow when you go out and bust your tail and you develop coaches and you develop players and do everything right. You're having a great year and you get to the quarters or the semis or maybe the championship game, and it's a guy like they just recruited all the talent and in the nation. I mean, they can pull from wherever they want. There's
right.
no limit. So that's the part that sucks. That's the hard part to deal with. But it's kind of like what you're saying. Like you're seeing it at the public school. Like we don't get that opportunity. So it does kind of suck.
It's and our private schools are different. Our private schools play in their own league. We can play private schools. We generally don't. I don't think I've ever played a private school in a game. We've done like JV games and stuff like that, but we've never
Right.
played them in a varsity game because there's actually, that actually changes the point structure. Like there's a whole, they have to be credited. We have, because of the way that our point structure goes, you have to be able to. So if you look at I know you've seen our gigantic spreadsheet of points.
Yeah.
And you'll notice on there that there's actually like point structures for out of state teams. So every out of state team that plays a Virginia team gets added into the point structure because they have to be points or something, like, whatever it is. So it's kind of wild and all of that. And I think actually, I know that one year and I don't know how it all works because I know that one year we played Goochland and I want to say that they had lost to a private school. I don't remember if they won or lost to Fork Union, which is a military school, Fork Union Military Academy. And I can't remember if they won or lost to Fuma. They played them every year, but it ended up that because we were 9-1, and that game didn't count for them, so they were 9-0. So we had the 1 seed, even though they beat us. So
Because they didn't have enough qualifying.
they
games
didn't have that extra game,
10
and
games,
so
right? Like,
it was an interesting. They didn't have that not extra game. They had one less game, and so you lose that fairly significant amount of points. Even if they had lost the game, it's still a significant amount of points and hard to make up. And so I think when we played them, we were both 9-0 at the end of the year, and they had won every district game for over a decade. And so we were playing them, and it was for a lot of pride, but nothing else. We were
right.
already locked in 1 seed, didn't matter, but that didn't change the game. I mean, that didn't change the way we coached the game or played the game.
Absolutely.
It could have. I mean, we could have been like, yeah, we're just going to put our backups out there, but we only have 27 kids, so they'd be getting murdered. So we didn't do that. But yeah, I was going to say I think that ultimately what we all want, and this is why it's so frustrating with people who go, oh, well, just line up and play the game. Like, I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm 100% fine with just line up and play the game. If we're all playing by the same rules, or if when we scheduled the game, we knew the rules you were playing by and the rules that we were playing by. If we had that option, like you don't have the option.
No.
You have to play.
And
Like I can schedule a private school and say, look, hey, we're just going to line up and play the game. They're a private school. It's cool. It doesn't matter because we scheduled them and we made this decision. But if, let's say that the team that we're having the issue with here in Virginia, everybody had them on the schedule. Maybe they've been in the same district for years and years and years. Everybody knows who they are. Everybody's, gearing up to play him. And all of a sudden they bring in a guy who brings in 20 kids with him. That's not the rules that we were playing by. That's not the rules that everybody else is playing by. And you go, well, they can do that too. And it's like, well, no, some of them have morals and a conscience. And so they can't just go break the rules, because some of us won't do that. So I still want to coach football. I won't, if we're going to do away with all of that, I won't coach football anymore, because I don't want to be a recruiter. I might coach youth football, but I don't want to be although that has issues too. But I don't want to do that. And so if I know that that's the rules, I won't do it. Right now, we still play, most of the teams on our schedule are playing somewhat by the rules. Like I said, I'm not that upset about the minor violations, the things that are kind of like questionable. Like you look at them and you go, I don't know. But like, we got teams that aren't playing by the rules, and I don't like that much. But like, but you talk about open enrollment. So we played a school in Richmond City, and they started. Richmond City had decided they were going to have open enrollment, and so this team got very good very quickly. And
That's the rules, right?
That's their rules. They have open enrollment, and we know that now. They're not going to be on our schedule anymore after this year. But quite frankly, even with open enrollment in Richmond City, they just got to be very competitive.
Right.
Then they went another step, and it's I don't know what's going to happen with that. But even with them, it's like, I don't know how to explain it, but like, it was little things over time, and you're like, huh, that's weird, but I can't prove anything. I'm just like, seems like a lot of guys moved in, but it's but it was like over time, and there's nothing that you can point to and be like, this is so. But when it's so bad, I just want to coach under the same rules. And I know what I want to do is I want to coach the way that we all, most of us, I think, grew up. I want to coach the guys that grew up playing football together and going to school together. And,
right.
Most of us, clearly not all of us, most of you listening to this podcast probably, other than the ones who are fuming mad right now that how dare you insult my integrity that you don't have. I think that we all have that kind of like, idealistic, maybe boys of fall type of deal where we're just playing with, we're coaching a bunch of kids who are just playing with the guys, and this is going to be like memories for the rest of their lives, and we're building character, and we're doing all these things. And like, yeah, we want to win. It's about winning, because you don't get to do it for long if you don't win. But more importantly, we're developing these guys, and developing these guys doesn't mean NILs. It doesn't mean, recruiting. It doesn't mean all those things. It means being where you're at and making the best of it and working your butt off and going out and playing the rivals. Like, how do you have rivalries when you do that? Like, these kids don't have
can't
rivalries.
beat them, join them, I think, unfortunately. There's still rivalries, but
well, I'm sure even with what you have in Oklahoma, like, it's not that massive, especially as you get into now it's different in Tulsa, right? But if you get into, and in Virginia, once you go into the more rural, like when I was in Amelia, it wasn't an issue because it's a pretty long drive to go anywhere else. A kid could transfer to Cosby. It's 35 minutes from the high school. Maybe they live on the Chesterfield border, but I doubt it. Like, it could happen, but it didn't happen much. And like I said, the little incidents are kind of like, meh, compared to, because this has been the joke used to be here, the 757, which is the eastern part. So going back to when it was Mike Vick and Ronald Curry and Allen Iverson were all playing against each other basically at the same time in the same area. Going back to that time, which I was in high school, or I was in college maybe, so I wasn't around for this stuff, but it was pretty well acknowledged that there was a lot of recruiting in the 757. And I remember 10 years later when I'm coaching, and 10, 15 years later, and I'm talking to guys who were from that area and who are like, man, the recruiting is so bad in Richmond. And I'm like, God, how did this happen? Because that didn't used to be the case. But you go out to the more rural parts, and it's just not an issue, right?
Kids can't make the
kids can't do
drive.
Right. You might have one or two, but it doesn't. So I'm sure parts of Oklahoma are still that way, where it doesn't really affect it. But And maybe that's the solution, is that all the guys who really want this can go live in the big cities, and all of us who don't want this, we can go, drive an hour or move out to, that's my retirement plan, is to live in Luray and coach for Page County or Luray or something like that. And they, of course, somebody from Page County or Luray is probably going to tell me like we have recruiting issues, but
Right.
It's my retirement plan.
You were talking about scheduling and how you can just choose not to schedule a team next year, right? Like make sure that the people on your schedule have the same rules. And they kind of squashed that in Oklahoma this year. So we basically had a group of public school coaches that determined, hey, we just won't play that game.
Right.
Because there is, at some point you have player safety to worry about.
Sure. Like, yeah. Especially if you're developing, trying to, recover a program.
40 strongest kids in the area, and their facilities are nicer. So their kids are just getting the advantage. Like sometimes you really have to go out and worry about, like, am I going to lose a player because this one stupid game? And so the OSSAA came down and said, if you decide not to play one game, you forfeit all the games in your district. So you basically take yourselves out of the playoffs. And so it's like, well, now we have to play them. Like our hands are tied. And we only reclass every 2 years, and we know they're not going up. So it's like you kind of get stuck in this conundrum where you're like, I'm forced to play these teams, regardless of my feelings on it, regardless of whether the rules are the same or not. So that's what really sucks. That's why another reason I'd be interested in the Virginia style. It's like we could just schedule whoever the hell we want. You could play 4A, 5A, 3A, 2A, whatever, but you know what the points value is. And I wonder, like right in my head, I'm wondering if that's why the private schools in Virginia ended up in their own league and stuff, is because people just wouldn't play.
It's always been that way. Because
I think that would be
didn't exist until, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. And no, we've never played private schools. Private schools have always been their own separate deal, at least as far back as I know. And
the big hit on
it's funny because you mentioned the private schools, and like I almost have some sympathy for the school that I was talking about that in Richmond City. I have some sympathy for them because while they were all playing by the rules and struggling very badly, not the current coaching staff and everything, but the school in general, they went for like a decade just getting they were the losingest school in the whole state. And I'm not even mad at them, because they were the team that had all of those gigantic schools that were breaking the rules on their schedule and just getting throttled by them, year after year after year. And so it's like, God, at some point they get they get something for it. And like, I don't love it, but whatever. Yeah. We'll just go off the schedule and move on.
I imagine that's exactly what would happen if we went to a alternative scheduling type like you guys have with point system. People just quit playing those teams. At some point, like you said, even if you lose to a team who goes out and wins the other 9 games on the schedule, you still get points. But I think with their limiting in their class size and all that, it wouldn't be worth it.
So teams go back and forth on what to do, and you can look at us and see that we ended up with good seeding. We played a very, very hard schedule. We lost our week 1 game to a team that went 8-2, I think. We lost to a 9-1 and a 10-0, where the only loss was the one beat the other one. One's a 4A and one's a 5A, I think. We lost to one 6-4, something like that. It's a 5A. And then we lost to this team that went 10-0. That's a 3A and going down to 2A. Like, we could go in and say we're just not going to play them because, I don't know how level the playing field is. And I don't want to go too far into them because I haven't studied it. I just I hear things.
It is what it is.
But, we could drop them, and we did because they're going down to 2A, but for other reasons too. But honestly, if they're a 3A and they're going to win 10 games, we're going to get 10 points or whatever it is for that. If they're a 4A, and the 4As aren't playing the same game, but if they're a 4A, we're going to get more. We're going to get bonus points to go and get our brains beat in. And so it actually was a deal where at first everybody's been going back and forth, and there's multiple ways to get points. You can schedule yourself into the playoffs, essentially. Schedule a couple teams that you can beat, and schedule some teams that are going to get you big points. That if you lose to them, what you don't do is you don't schedule teams that are going to beat you and not beat anybody else, and they're the same size or smaller than you. Like, if you're going to schedule somebody who's going to beat you, make sure they're going to beat a lot of other people, and even better if they're bigger than you. But like but initially, I think that has worked because there are pros and cons to scheduling anybody. Where, I'll use the example of Dinwiddie here, who is very, very good, very often goes 9-1, 10-0, and has beat the brakes off of us for years. We could drop Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie dropped us last year to go play out of state, go play an Ohio game, play a team in Ohio, and we were like, okay. We were able to schedule another game pretty quickly because, again, we're smaller than everybody else, but we do win games, and so people like scheduling us. It wasn't hard to find a game. But like we could drop Dinwiddie, I guess. It's a traditional, not a rivalry, but we're very close proximity. I mean, my head coach went there, so like it's not something we're looking to drop. But like we could, I guess. But also, when we didn't play Dinwiddie 2 years ago, the team that we played ended up beating us. We played like garbage, but they were a 2A who didn't have a ton of wins. And it turns out that we were happy to not have to play Dinwiddie, but had we played them and lost to them instead of losing to the other team, we would have actually had better seeding in the playoffs.
Right.
And it's like one of those. So the way our system works is it would actually be beneficial to some teams to play. So some teams would look and go, "Oh, you're going to drop that private school that's going to go 10-0 and is a 3A." Well, if I'm a 2A, I'm like, I'll take it.
Yeah,
because I'm like if I'm a 2A that's trying to turn the program around, and I just want to get in the playoffs. I just want to and I want to be able to say that, right? I want to host a home playoff game. I want to have those things, get better seeding so that maybe we can win a game, that kind of stuff. Which is our situation. I can't believe it was this year, but that's what happened. I mean, that's essentially what happened. Wasn't planned at all, but if that were to happen in Virginia and somebody says we're just not going to play that school, I promise you that there would be a 2A who went 2-8 who would say, I'll take it. And we're going to drop this team that went 3-7 and beat us. This 2A that went 3-7 and beat us. We're going to drop them. We're going to take this 3A and, hell, they're going to go 10-0 anyway. We might as well be the ones to be there. So
I'm very
there's like
intrigued
pros and cons
about picking up that scheduling. There's got to be so much chaos trying to everyone trying to get their own schedule together, but
it is. But we had the traditional schedules, the traditional districts, and most teams still play within their traditional districts. Like I said, we've dropped 2 of those games because of the fact that they were 6As and we're 3As. And really, that's the reason for the realignment. It's important to understand something because a lot of you may not understand. Because I know when I was in Iowa, they realigned like every year. But they had, and I'm sure you do too. They had like
every other year
towns that just like all of a sudden disappear. There's no kids in the high school anymore. So it's like we just stick a bunch of them together, make a new high school team, and then we got to, they redo it. But we don't have that here. People live where they live, and they've always lived where they live. And some of the cities, some of the towns have gotten bigger, and some built new schools. But for the most part, if you were a 1A, you're still a 1A. If you're a 2A, you're still a 2A. If you're a 3A, you pretty much, we live in that border between 2A and 3A, which seem to have more movement. The 2A, 3A, and 3A, 4A seem to have more movement than most other places, and maybe 4A, 5A. The middle has more movement. But, the small schools are always small. The big schools are always big. It's just the way it is. So, but for 30 years, maybe more, at least 20, there was no realignment. There was no talk of real. I mean, sure, there was talk of it, but we just played who we played and did what we did. And it didn't matter that Colonial Heights had 750 kids and Thomasdale had 200, 2,300 or whatever they have, 2,000 or 1,800 or whatever. It doesn't matter. Prince George had 1,600. I think we had 750. I was at Prince George, so it was cool. But, now it's not cool.
It's way less cool.
Now, when I was at Prince George and we weren't very good, we're like, let's get Colonial Heights. Let's see if we can get them twice. But that was just the way that it was. And there were a few schools that moved up and down, like Matoaka moved from 2A. Matoaka won a bunch of 2A state titles, and there were a couple of 2A state titles, and they moved up to 3A. It used to just be 3. So we had 4 schools that made. There were 4 regions. We had 4 schools that made the playoffs, like in your region, and there was 3 state titles to play for. Basically the same number of schools we have now. So it was brutal. Like Colonial Heights could have moved down to 2A. At the time, Colonial Heights was big it still is somewhat. All of the things are changing in the Heights, but for years, Colonial Heights was small enough that they could move down to 2A anytime they wanted. The problem was in 2A, they didn't play tennis. They didn't play field hockey. They didn't play, golf. So they would lose they would essentially lose the country club sports. And so for Colonial Heights, it wasn't worth it to move down because the people who made those decisions, their kids would lose their sports, right?
Yeah.
And so that decision was not getting made. And so they said, just screw it. We're going to get blown out in basketball and football and just, we'll have a really good band. And that's the deal. So, for years we were just stuck. And so now we have those traditional districts, which for the most part we still play. But there are schools, especially like some of the Richmond City schools, they were stuck in districts where, because the city had smaller schools. So all the city schools are smaller. And then the county schools are bigger. And in Virginia, we have cities and county school districts. So like in Georgia, everybody was in a county, right? Everybody was in a county. There was no Marietta school district.
We're all cities here.
Yeah. So the schools that were in Richmond City, along with being essentially inner city and having less money and having a harder time getting teachers, which means coaches, and all of those things, and not having all the support and having a hard time getting kids to class and all the things that happen with inner city schools, they also would have to then go play the county schools because that's who they were in the district with and that's who they were close to. And so they would also be playing 700 kids go and play a school with 2,000 who's illegally recruiting and who's boat racing everybody, and they got to go play that game, and they got to go play 3 or 4 of them a year. They were able to, they were almost all able to get new schedules. They play each other. They would play us, or they would play Prince George, some teams that were not as good, and they were able to get those scheduled. And they go out and they play some further out county schools, because you don't have to drive but an hour. You're out, right? You're in 2A schools. So they would play those. And the way that they did it was because, again, things aren't great there, and they don't play home games unless they're playing each other.
Right.
And so essentially we would play Thomas Jefferson or John Marshall. When I was at Prince George, we played Thomas Jefferson and John Marshall. And our schedule one year would be 5 home games and 5 away games, because on those years they were home games for us. And then the next year we would play 7 home games and 3 away games, because it was their year to be the home team. They played it with us and we just split the gate. And so that's how they managed to get those games. I think it's a big part of how they got those games scheduled. Also, for a while, they were wins. Not all of them are wins anymore, because, so there's a lot of movement, and there's not a ton of movement in the schedules, but there's a couple teams who have managed to do it. You have to have a carrot, right? There can't be no reason to play you, but almost everybody, you can find a carrot. Either you're scheduling a win, and there is more points for winning, right? There is more, you get double the points for a win. But you're either scheduling a win, or you're scheduling a lot of points because they're bigger than you, or you're scheduling a lot of home games, or there's something that you can do to get all of that scheduled and negotiate it.
I don't want this to be just a pouting episode, because I feel like that's what I've been about some of the Oklahoma stuff. I do appreciate what the transfer portal does for our kids, because just looking at an example of my alma mater. So I'm a Lone Grove graduate. And back then, we truly hated Plainview, right? Plainview is the west side of Ardmore, which is just yet another town in Oklahoma that no one knows about. But it's where like all the doctors and lawyers, everybody went and lived in this little Plainview area. And it's just a school. I'm pretty sure that it's not even a town. I think it's actually Ardmore, Oklahoma still. It's just their own school district. But we hated them, right? We always thought they were the snobs. Now,
that was where I went.
2 of my nephews go to that school, right? That's who we had to play a couple weeks ago in the playoffs, and got to go down there and beat them, which for me and all the coaches at Lone Grove, who we played week 10 as well, it was kind of like a satisfying thing. Like, haha, we went beat up on the rival. But to the kids, like, you talked about rivals not existing anymore. They truly don't care. Getting back to my main point here, my nephews are over there because the Lone Grove has not prioritized football. And so, yes, they have some okay facilities, but they're still using the same weight room we were using in the late 90s. And I'm not sure that any equipment has been changed out. I mean, it's just there's things they have not prioritized. Now they've built some new facilities, new locker rooms. They tried to dress up the field a little bit, but if you leave, like we played at Lone Grove in week 10, week 11, we were at Plainview. There's no doubt which one of them prioritizes football. So with this transfer portal, if I need my kid, if I want them to have the most advantages, they're going to need a very nice weight room. I want them to have now Lone Grove's field is absolutely beautiful. I've always loved that field. It's still traditional grass, but Plainview is on turf. So it's like, there's just so many things that Plainview offers kids now that Lone Grove doesn't offer in the football realm. Lone Grove just started wrestling to try to like play catch up, right? So there's all these reasons you might transfer.
Wrestling.
Yeah, there's some that don't. And wrestling that I know of was not very big here. Even like I graduated 06 from high school. I don't know that I ever met a high school wrestler.
Huh.
So it just wasn't a thing.
That's surprising.
So I am glad that our kids can go chase that advantage and they're not locked into my hometown sucks. They don't care about the sport that I love. And now I'm stuck on a crappy team.
Yeah.
With a coach with a bad, I'm not saying any coach out there is bad that
right.
But
no, but I mean
if the team isn't prioritizing the sport, they're also not going to get a good coach or that wants to stick around and deal with that crap, right? Like,
right, you're gonna get, you may get the one who's, again, I don't know anything about this, but you may get the one who's, trying to get a stepping stone or whatever. I think that's definitely like, I'm glad you brought that up because, we've been coming at it from the coaching standpoint and coming at it from the standpoint of coaches who are misusing or abusing the situation, but there certainly is something to be said for this is better for the kids to have the option. Is it fair for a kid to just have to deal with the fact that he is in a place where, I'll give you, a local example here. And one of my former players got fired over something that I think was absolute garbage. And I think the school board should be ashamed of themselves. And as long as they continue to do it this way, they're going to continue to fall short when they shouldn't. They should be a dominant program. And it's very much on the shoulders of the adults, and the kids suffer for it. The kids suffer for it because coaches don't stay. The kids suffer for it because when they have somebody, they fire him or run him off. And, the kids, this is a place where kids don't transfer, right? This is this place where kids stay. And it's probably too far for most of them to have the option, but, and they're not, these aren't rich kids. These aren't anything like that. But, I think it's great that I think it would be, there is a benefit to that. There's a benefit to, like I said, there's a benefit in Richmond City to being able to go to, there are 5 high schools in the city. 3 of them are very good this year. 2 of them, not so much. I thought, got my numbers right. No, I got my numbers wrong. Kennedy. Kennedy's not there. One of them's not very good. How's that? And it's weird. Like, but year in and year out, there's some that are good. For a long time, all of them are bad. But now some of them are good. Some of them are okay. Right. But I think it's great that they can move back and forth or move from one school to another because there's the schools and what school has, they reasoned it based on academics, right? They have a math and science school. They have a art school. And I think that's great. I don't know how much that gets, I don't know how much it gets used for that. I'm sure among the regular kids, it gets used more because, we just see it from the football standpoint. But yeah, like if you shouldn't be forced to play under a guy you hate for 4 years. And we all dealt with it. Like, shoot, they made a movie about it. It's called Varsity Blues. Like, like you just hate the head coach. He's awful. At least
he won championships.
Yeah. And like they, but like, and I never hated my head coaches. I never hated any of my coaches. Some of them pissed me off sometimes, but I wouldn't have gone anywhere. But I can imagine being in a place where, especially if you have a place where the school board doesn't care, or a situation that was here where the school board cared because the head coach was hired because he was related to one of the school board, but everybody who was not in a decision-making position knew that was the wrong guy. And they had no legal means here, like they would have in Oklahoma, to say, you know what, screw it. I don't want to play for this guy. I'm going to go to the school over here. What they had to do was, you know what, screw it. I'm just not going to play. And a lot of kids didn't get to play at least a portion of their high school career because somebody made a decision based on something other than, is this guy the right guy for this football program? And so maybe if all of those kids could have just said, I'm going to go to this school, this school, this school. So all of them couldn't, by the way. Okay. That's not an option for everybody, but if they, just because everything's not close, but maybe if a few of them did, maybe that would have moved things along faster. I don't know. Cause if you start having a mass legal exodus from your school, it's hard to cover up. It's hard to cover up with 20 kids leaving a year and they all do it using their, like you said, they got one option. And if they all use that one option in the same year, it's pretty, and they all go to different places, right? It's pretty easy to go, I see the problem.
Yeah. Yep. Unfortunately, that's, there's still schools out there like that right now that those kids are using those options. And I think it has and once again, like you're saying, it's highlighting some school districts out there that have been poorly administered, whether that's the board or the superintendent, principal, coach, whatever.
Yeah.
People are leaving. So it has definitely started putting that highlighter to numbers with people going, oh, maybe there is an issue out there.
And it's funny because I think a lot of people would think like, oh, they don't want to play for the guys that a guy that wants to coach them tough. I can tell you right now that ain't the case.
No,
that ain't
I
the
think
case, because I know where the kids go, because we have kids that move, and I don't know all of their details. But like I said, these aren't the ones that I'm upset about. But we have kids that go to a school, obviously everywhere has parents that choose to live somewhere because, yeah, maybe the cost of living is a little, maybe the cost of the housing is a little bit lower or whatever, but they will choose an area. Here you might pay a little bit more taxes in one county or another, but for the most part, one district to another, you can find a place to live that's relatively comparable. It's not all across the board, but if we're talking, especially if we're talking county schools, you find a place that's about the same. And I know where the parents go; they go to the winners. And
that's right.
when that
No matter how tough they are,
and then,
right?
and it's and the winners are often tough on those kids, and that's where that doesn't factor into their decision. That the kids don't hate working hard. I think there's a lot of guys who think that, I don't know, there's a lot of guys, but I definitely hear from coaches who say things, and we've been attacking this for however long I've been doing this podcast with the Coach Simple Play Fast Win whole philosophy. Is it kind of goes back to like the extreme ownership and all those things, and you hear coaches come in and say things like, come into our circle, and they'll say things like, well, we're trying to turn this program around, but these kids just don't want to win. They don't want to work hard. They don't want to. That's not it. That ain't it. I promise you, that's not it. I promise you that if you convince them that this hard work is worth it, and then you show the fruits of the labor, they will work hard. That's not an issue. So they're not going to go looking for the easy way out. I think guys get hung up on that with baseball and basketball and stuff. Everybody wants to play basketball because basketball is just fun to shoot baskets. No, that's not it. A few kids maybe, but
right.
But that's not syncing your program, right? That's not syncing your program.
Well, sweet, man. I think we've checked all the boxes tonight, even though they weren't even pre-filled.
They weren't on the boxes. This is just this is not.
That's okay. That episode will get pushed to the next one. This is a great conversation to have, and there's going to be like people changing jobs recently, or here coming up. I know in Oklahoma the list has already started. The job openings are starting to hit, and
I would love to come back and revisit this if people want to, because we're limited by the fact that we only know 2 states. We know the situation in Oklahoma, we know the situation in Virginia. And I don't know about, you've kind of talked about it and I've kind of talked about it. It's not like something that we spend a lot of our time studying and mulling over. It's just, it's the situation, and it is. Here in Virginia, the one situation has been a major news story. I have friends, this is more in Northern Virginia. I have friends who live in Alexandria, and where they listen to the sports talk radio up there, which talks about nothing but Commanders and Wizards and, Nationals. And they never, ever, ever talk about high school sports, especially high school football. Not especially high school football. They never talk about high school football. Our Richmond stations still talk high school football, but in Northern Virginia, it's different. It's DC Metro, and they don't. We don't have any teams to talk about. Like they don't have Flying Squirrel Hour here for our AA baseball team. So we talk high school sports because that's what we have. But it's been all over their news coverage. I mean, to the point that they were like, "What is happening with this?" Because like they keep talking about high school football on our sports talk radio. So it's been a major news story here. So I'm glad we get to talk about it. But I would love to hear from people. If you want to send an email, send a tweet to Daniel. Don't send it to me. But send an email to me, joe@joedanielfootball.com. Tweet Daniel, whatever, and share like what your story is. I think everybody has one. And of course, then you have the places that I know we have the places that probably don't have those issues, like in North Dakota. They have to go 3.5 hours for a game. So nothing's perfect. I don't know. But yeah, I'd love to hear from people. Maybe we can come back and revisit with some stories from other states.
For sure.
Because everybody's got weird stuff. I know, Con's been on and we talk about Massachusetts, and Massachusetts is weird. Bill Weiss has been on from Minnesota, and we talked about Bill. Bill went through an entire season just like struggling because they were playing nothing but 4As and 5As, and I forget what their level was, but they were playing up the entire season and go and rip off like 4 wins in the playoffs when they finally get to play teams their size. So we all have scenarios. We all have, every state is different.
You guys up in Jersey, I know there's some guys that listen up in the Jersey area and Maryland. You guys, I already tweet with most of you guys, so just hit me up. Let's talk about it sometime.
I know North Carolina's got some stuff too. I know that one from being here, but Maryland, I don't ever hear anything about. My wife's from Maryland, but she didn't know anything about the football team. She didn't have a clue.
There you go. Sweet, man. Let's pay the bills. Get out of here.
Matter of fact, somebody tell me what the situation is in Montgomery County so I can tell my wife that everybody has problems. Yeah. So you can go to joedanielfootball.com/system. We've got a exclusive guide that's been put together to help put together the ultimate defensive coaching system for your football team. It's going to learn about the things that need to be in a coaching system, what a coaching system looks like. You've got to have a system. So what's in a system? What does a system look like? How does the system work? How do you get that system installed? And the 5 mistakes that you must avoid if you want your defensive system to be successful. It's a free download. Just go to joedanielfootball.com/system.
Perfect. Patreon.com/Chamberlain Football Consulting is where I am moving most of my communications. So if you want to talk ball, that is a great place to go find a tier for you. There's some pretty cheap ones. If you just want to come in and learn how to do one thing here or there, it could be, I've got a group that's just doing Photoshop, like how to make graphics for my team and help celebrate the kids a little bit better, how to design clothing for the team, I'm kind of doing it all out there. So if there's something like that you're wanting to learn behind the scenes, once again, X's and O's, I'm still going to push you guys to Joe. Like he is still, the JDFB system is still the best X's and O's system for coach education.
Maybe you should go to Kenny. He's still playing. I don't know.
Kenny is still playing, but right now he's only 1 week further than me. So
that's right.
He's probably going to go.
We had one of those schools that was just absolutely loaded, and they lost this week. And I was like, you know what's satisfying? They lost the same round we did. At the end of the day, you're just like, yeah, you know what?
The records today aren't that different. You can jump over to YouTube. You can email me at chamberlainfootballconsulting@gmail.com. And then I'm on Twitter/X at Coach Chambo. Okay.
I am at Joe Daniel Football on Instagram, TikTok, joedanielfootball.com/YouTube is where you can watch the podcast come out every Tuesday. Audio comes out on Thursday. The following Tuesday, the video gets posted to YouTube, so you can check that out. You can email me, joe@joedanielfootball.com. I'm missing one, facebook.com/joedanielfootball. Check us out there. And I had something else, but I forget what it was. I don't know. No, sounds good.
AthleticSpeedMovement.com. Yep. Go there now. Get signed up. Get learning. This is Thanksgiving week. It's a great week. Give you some reading material while you're sitting at home not doing work, because I'm sure most teachers aren't teaching this week. Get ready for January, man.
Break. Just go ahead and shut it down and just look at some stuff on the computer.
There you go. Podcast is at the FBCP on X/Twitter. If this is your first time listening to the Football Coaching Podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. You can find us on your favorite podcatcher, especially on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Those are also the locations that we would love to have your reviews. We're looking for 4 and 5 stars because that's what helps spread the news. If it's worse than that, by all means, let us know. Let's see if it's something we can change. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Football Coaching Podcast. And remember, coach simple, play fast, win.